Well, welcome to Minhag Dirigo. Joining me again, even though this is actually, I'm gonna fess up. I just
Yeah.
changed jacket, but this is actually like 2 minutes after we recorded the other one,
Oh
the
man.
last one. But uh, joining me again is my brother, Pastor Kevin Kresge of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and this is a short one. We're gonna compare notes on Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac. Uh, in the Jewish tradition, uh, I read this every morning at the beginning. We call it the Akeda. I read it
Hmm.
at the beginning of like our. It's part of our morning liturgy to read the story. Um, there's so much midrash, and midrash is kind of like explorative storytelling in Judaism. Is the best way I can put it, and there's so much on it in our tradition, but for Christianity, well, I'll just let you say for Christianity, what is the importance of the binding of Isaac in the Christian tradition?
I mean, in terms of, well, gosh, the binding of Isaac specifically, or the sto like the whole story.
Uh, yeah, the meta narrative, and then the maybe we get into the individual details. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, there's not like I wouldn't say there's like super interpretation for like every like minute piece of the story, but the overarching kind of idea from a Christian perspective, theologically, is that one we see the we see and recognize the validity of like obviously the historical meaning and value of the passage. So there's no diminishment there intended. It's but to the Christian perspective, it's it's part of the larger canonical arc in terms of the Christian story. It's not something that we see as being replaced or supplanted. There's no we come back to kind of like that whole supersessionalist nonsense. No, um, it but at the same time, somebody might say the very next word that I'm going to use would be considered supersessionalist in the sense that uh, typically people would see this as a full that the Christian um, theology is sees this as being a fulfilled example of like a typification of what is to come.
like a
In that, like,
prefiguring of the sacrifice of
exactly, it prefigures Christ in the sense
yeah.
that like that Isaac, in a sense, prefigures Christ because we have all of that idea. It's a beloved son, given of God specifically. God is going to provide the ram, right? Like God is going to provide. Um, Carries the wood of his own sacrifice, offered on Mount Moriah. I mean, let's and then there's the substitution. Um, and so like the ram dies, of course, but of course, in the story of Isaac, then of course the ram dies instead of him. That knife never falls in terms of like we don't, Abraham doesn't actually have to go through. God, stays his hand. Um, so we see it as Genesis 22, the sacrifice of Isaac. That sacrifice is interrupted, but at Calvary, then of course with Jesus, it's not. Um, so I think that hits like the big points that like we have. Okay, yeah, bud, I hear you. Sorry, dog just started whining.
Yeah.
Um, but so like the Akeda in this case, for we don't really talk about it in that term. Like I know it, but like I would say a lot of Christian pastors probably know it. But like we see like God Himself is bearing the cost of being faithful to the covenant, because this is a faith to the covenant that like if we look theologically back to what like Genesis 14, 15, 16. God binds himself to the covenant, but not Abraham. Like he puts Abraham to sleep and then passes between the halves of the animals himself. So this is a fulfillment of that. God is once again not requiring that Abraham actually be held to the binding of that covenant, but still benefits from it, right? We still benefit from it. Uh, so he's not requiring it of Abraham, but he requires it of himself. And then we see that provision then as being met through Christ. So it for us, this passage reveals a faith that trusts God beyond death. It's a foreshadowing of the substitution that we see as taking place through Christ, and then that it's a promise fulfilled, not revoked. That there's no revocation of any of that covenant. In fact, that covenant carries forward, and it's not about human sacrifice, which I always like to, because so many people will take that. We talked about it in the last bit in a sense where like people get this very glib outside analysis of scripture where they kind of pretend armchair theologian and start trying to lob what they think are very crafty like nukes across the wall, and they say like, oh yeah, it's a death cult and this and that. It's really not.
Yeah,
If
it's the
anything,
opposite.
it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
It's and the thing is about I would it's divine provision. And the beautiful part about that is a big piece of both stories, like both interpretations of the story, is that divine provision
Yeah.
is it because of obedience. Because we see it as not only we see Abraham's blessed obedience, because what? Abraham's obedience is accounted to him as righteousness. The way we talk about it. When we see Abraham obedient again unto the point of death, right? And you see those words in Latin on a lot of church walls in Jerusalem. Uh, you know, uh, I have it in a photo. I'm trying to remember the exact terminology in Latin, but like obedient unto the point of death. Um, Abraham's obedient with what God has given him unto the point of death. So it's like this selflessness, the substitution, and like God being willing to step in on our behalf, that the cost is borne by him, not by us. Um, because someone was willing to be obedient to the point of death. Like there's a lot of parallels there.
What's
So
fascinating is in the Jewish tradition, we have such a complex and multifaceted relationship with the same passage. We if you go to Rashi, one of our most noted commentators, it's just interesting little tidbits about it. The Sarah, the fact that the death of Sarah occurs chronologically very shortly thereafter indicates that it was the trauma that of the experience that killed her, that caused her death. And but then there's a midrash that we have that Isaac was actually dies in the Akedah, um, that he is bound on the altar, and that he's rescued by that he's not so much rescued by an angel, but because we have this story later downstream where Abraham returns alone to his servants. It doesn't mention
mhm.
that Isaac comes back with him.
Right.
So it's very interested. There's you know and there's some that,
Honestly, if I was Isaac, I'd take a minute.
yeah, well, and that's the thing too. The age of Isaac, I don't know what Christianity deems. Do you guys have a fixed age for Isaac? Is he a child in the narrative for you guys, or?
Honestly, it's like a lot of the artistic interpretation that you see of scripture. In some cases, you see him as a young man. In others, they depict him as a younger boy. Not like super small, but like I would say artistic interpretation. There's very little theological interpretation on this in terms of He's obedient to his father, I think. So you would suspect that he's not of age, but you know, he also submits, which suggests that he could be. So there's like that. There's a split on that, but depending on almost like depending on who you're talking to, that was never seen as like the most important part of the story, but the act, Isaac's willingness as well as Abraham's willingness to submit and be obedient are probably what I think are considered the more important aspects.
Yeah.
But so short answer, no.
Yeah, yeah, and we go back and forth on this too. The general consensus belief is that he was 37 years old.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and or and we extrapolate that from, Yitzchak's birth, Sarah was 90, and then 127 when she died. So, and she died right after they came back from the mountains. So he was 37. That's the math that they put in there, and it adds an interesting dimension for me, like because at 37, you know, Dad's taking me up on a mountain. He's
Yeah.
laying me down on an altar. It's easy for a child to have the unquestioning faith in his father that nothing bad is going to happen. But at 37, he's been around the bush. We have some tradition in our story that he was possibly abused by Ishmael as a
Mm,
child, just based on the language, that like Sarah uses when she, confronts Abraham about uh, what Ishmael's doing with Isaac,
mm, yeah.
and the reasons why they're sent out of the camp. So the kid's already been through it, possibly. And at 37, he's going up on a mountain. It makes it even that much stronger a story if he's, not a child.
Willing. Right.
Yeah. And
Well, and I know a lot of people will assume that Christians think young boy like 13 to 18,
yeah,
but that's really not the case. Um, like I would say based on like that same idea, the one that I see most often, and I was just doing some quick digging here. I pull up my logo stuff and it tends to think young adult.
yeah.
Not necessarily as old as 37, but at least 20.
Hey, when you're living to be 127, 30,
20 is the new
37,
37,
yeah,
you
it's still
know.
a young bull. Um,
Yeah, because I mean, what? Sarah was 127 when she died.
yeah,
So, yeah. I mean, the thing is that he's willing to do it, and he asks reasoning questions on the way up.
yeah,
Like not like where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Like,
yeah.
and of course Abraham says, God will
Oh, God
provide.
will provide. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he's obviously not young child,
I,
one would say.
I, I really like this. I'm challenged by the story, but I also really, and I tend to view, a lot of people use Rashi's commentary. I tend to turn to a guy, Ibn Ezra, and he's the start of the deeper theological, for me, the real good start of the deeper theological thing that God's orders, our trust in God, we're trusting in something that transcends any understanding that we're ever going to have. And I think it's a common theme. It's the story, like, some people say, God's answer to Job, he punts. Yeah, I felt like it was a punt, but at the same time, it's like it's the best explanation you're ever going to get is that, you know, you're not ever going to understand the cosmic implications of anything that I tell you to do. So just get over it. And I
Yeah.
and I and I feel like that level, like we're rewarded for that level of obedience, and that's the model that's set by Abraham. If you obey, there's a reward. It's covenantal. And and I think that's probably true of both our takes on it. It's that, it goes into that covenantal relationship with God. Um, so it's
Well, I know, like, I was doing some digging today, given, quick notice on like talking about this. And
yeah,
I know you had mentioned Rashi once before. there was a quote associated with this, and correct me if I have this wrong. I just tried to write this down quickly. Because of this obedience, God remembers Israel with mercy.
Yep.
Um, so I found a similar quote from Wesley that this
Who-
obedience witnesses to faith, but salvation rests on God's grace alone. So it's a similar concept. And I don't know that Wesley ever read Rashi
I don't think
to know.
I don't know if Rashi would. I mean, he could read French, right?
Yes.
I'm supposing that there might have been some translations of Rashi into French, but I don't know when that would have happened.
Yeah. I mean, he might have been exposed to it through the that teacher that he had, that friend that he had that was a Spanish guy, right? The
Yes, yeah, and I don't know how much Rashi would have figured in, like since he was Rashi was more on the Ashkenazi side of things. I don't know
right.
if a Sephardic fellow would have been as who knows, it's
Yeah.
but his
But yeah.
commentaries were certainly popular. I mean, they were around, so
So okay. Yeah. I mean, that's I mean, yeah. So I mean, I don't think there's obviously different takes on the story to like in certain ways, but I think the core ideas are very similar.
yeah,
But the stories mean different things to us. Like like value is similar, but I know the the core meanings are significant and different in the sense of like the meaning to um like say the meaning to Jews versus the meaning to Christians. Like we're obviously seeing it as typification of Christ. That's something that obviously Jews aren't going to do. Um,
I know
so
we're all interested in the question of why does you know God's choice of words, in that your son, your only son, whom you
mhm,
love, Isaac. Why didn't God just simply say Isaac? You-
right. Well, I mean, if I mean reading into deeper into the story, I mean, somebody that's sarcastic is going to read that and go, you know, there might be some bias here in terms of the writing. I've being that I feel that scripture is inspired and God breathed, I'm not going to be one of those. Uh, I feel as though that Abraham would have put more value on Isaac because this is the fulfillment of the promise to him,
yeah,
right? That Ishmael being his son is also his son by his own means. I mean, and of course we know Isaac and Ishmael not his only offspring. Like there were what, at least three others? I think there was a daughter too, um, that are referenced, but like, and I may be crazy here. I thought that I remember reading that. Um, it's just everything gets mashed together after a while. Um, and it's not a thing I spend a ton of time on because really Isaac and Ishmael are the two that we're generally shown to care about. Um, I know there's a family tree I looked at that I think there's more offspring there, but that are mentioned like once.
yeah,
But I mean, this is the thing where Isaac is the child of the promise. And so your beloved, right? That's this is the one that I promised you that you were waiting for that. Yeah, you kind of got a little impatient there and caused problems. Uh, but you know, I think that's the real reason behind that wording is this is the one of value. This is the one that I promised you. This is the one that I told you was going to happen. So this is the one that you need to, this is the one that's going to be the one you love and value more. Not to say that we we don't pick favorites.
you know, one of the interesting parts of all this, interesting dimensions that I've found in studying it was um, so there's a dispute in the rabbis' response because, of course, we have the Deuteronomists. We have, if you believe in the documentary hypothesis theories and such about the Torah, which I partially do because there is a clear narrative shift that comes with stuff that would have made sense in the context of return from the Babylonian exile. Um, and like the primacy of the temple sacrificial cult, right? So one of the questions is how can Abraham give a sacrifice when he's not a priest, right?
Yeah,
and uh and so this is
but
where
pre this is also pre-temple. This is also pre-establishment of the sacrificial
right, but
tradition.
this is where Melchizedek comes in.
Right. Yeah,
Or
Genesis 15, right?
yeah.
And that's when we go, hey, look who this guy is. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean that's the
So
I
yeah,
mean,
and he bequeaths that priesthood unto Abraham in our
right.
tradition.
Okay.
Um, but so this is why, and this is why Melchizedek is actually important, like, is because, that this is how Abraham becomes like kind of the proto priest model.
Okay.
Um, and I think this is interesting because doesn't Melchizedek, um, kind of presage uh, the Christ priestly status for Christian. I mean, it's probably a dumb
Well, I
segue,
mean,
but
no, I mean Jesus is referred to at one point in the New Testament as the priest in the order of Melchizedek. That
yeah,
is yeah. So um that's totally a thing. And the reason for that is being king of peace, being that Melchizedek is the king of Salem, and also the high priest, and offers essentially bread and wine. He's offering communion,
yeah,
Passover. There's like that whole tie-in, and then the fact that like they're sharing the meal and the blessing that Melchizedek offers is that um, was that conference, but like in the sense of Judaism, but it's just a blessing of it's more like an anointing in Christian theology, more of an anointing and like acknowledgement of that God is saying like, yes, this is you've done the right thing because and the reason for that is uh the relation way that's also looked at that way because of the thing that takes place just before that, which is the battle, and the only one that if I remember correctly, I have to sit down and read this again. The only one who uh, refuses a tribute is Melchizedek, and then there's the blessing, and um, oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember the exact how that exact. It's when it's when Abraham has to enlist the help of the kings,
oh yeah, yeah,
and and Salem is one of the kingdoms that assists, and if I like the only one who takes refuses tribute, I think is yes, the only one who refuses tribute is Melchizedek, and then uh, Abraham offers the the blessing or
yeah.
the meal. Yeah, I'm yeah. Sorry, I could look it up, but that would be too easy. I'm going to sit here and try and force myself to remember it.
It's it's interesting. So the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmudic eras believed that Melchizedek was actually Shem, Noah's
Hmm.
son, um, which makes
I mean,
the overlap with Abraham really interesting. But
I was going to say that's also a huge. jump in time.
Well, he would have been like 465 or so like years old when
Yeah.
when but I don't know. I've always it's interesting because the transition to the priesthood is something that you know exists in rabbinical Judaism from and and we have midrash that indicates that and it's also uh he's the source of that like kind of outlier term in reference to God in the Torah,
Hmm.
um El Elyon, God most, we usually translate it as God most high.
Hmm.
um so I mean, and that's attributed to Melchizedek. So I mean, and it's the only time we really see that in the five books, really, and a variation on it. But I find it fascinating. It's if you're a documentary hypothesist or believe in like you're doing critical study of Torah, was he like was El Elyon actually some Proto-Canaanite deity, or was it actually
Mm.
a different, I go with different name for God because of what I believe, obviously, but yeah, all the variations on God's
I,
name in
I don't know.
Torah.
I kind of feel like I kind of feel like the names and the names there are very important.
Yeah.
And the fact that the names are, I mean, Melchizedek is the king of Salem, and he's also the priest of the Most High God.
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, I'm not aware of any other referring to themselves as the Most High. Uh, in like culturally, there's a pantheon usually across the board, from most other faiths, and like that's the one thing that's absent in this is there's no pantheon here. There's no
No.
like, because even the Canaanites were, had a pantheon.
Yeah, they're always some kind of polytheistic thing,
Yeah.
and we may well have been as well early on, but that's the transition to monotheism is a very, whenever it took place in Judaism, was a very important, because they find evidence like Elephantine Island, like they coexisted with uh, uh, polytheistic religions pretty easily for one that was ostensibly monotheistic before the kings. So
Right.
it's and even then they still find like especially like household idols in digs of the like ancient Hebrews, that where
Hmm.
they find like a Shera. I mean, but that could well be too that we were monotheistic on paper, but that maybe that was part of the problem is that we never really, we always kind of, hey, let's make a golden calf. Maybe that
Right.
episode is a recurring theme throughout. Well,
Yeah.
it clearly is throughout the Kings.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I mean, when you get to what Ahaz and yeah, gosh. Yeah, there's no short list of kings that slipped and or went back to the idea of worshiping other gods. And
yeah,
certainly, I mean, even just the way the way God is written and speaks of, when you think of the commandments, uh, there's not a I am the only. It's I am your only. I am the only one that you are going to worship. You will have no other God before me. It's not saying, and then of course you've got, what is it, Psalm 22, where it's David writing, and I said to, uh, Jesus references it again later, that like my Lord said to my Lord. Um, there's like this, and I think it also exists in Deuteronomy, maybe, where there's like these three passages where the language is very much the same, where it's God referring to little g God, little g gods, almost like that, kind of carrying over that idea of that there may be a pantheon recognized contextually, historically, exegetically at the time. but that the one that matters is the big G. You know, the one that says no other before me. So like, while there may be others that are known and recognized, and there obviously were, um, yeah, thou shalt not, right? Like that's just that's that. At least that's how we're taught. Um,
Yeah.
from a theological perspective, is that we didn't step into this the monotheistic notion of that there are no other until much later, um, in
And
in terms of written history.
and of course, for my part, I do believe that there are no other gods. So
Well, yeah, same.
it's a because it what and this is one of those things that I always come back to because it just delights me to no end. Um, they're unlike every other god in history. We use terms like El Elyon, and how they translate is one thing, but every way we describe God is always how it relates to us. God is merciful. The 13 attributes that Judaism recites, every single one of them is God's behaviors or characteristics as it relates to humanity. There is no mythology of God going out and like conquering other gods. There's no theology of God. I mean, there's stories, like prophets acting on behalf, like,
Yeah.
and but you know,
Key differentiator that they always called out to us is that God in Judeo-Christian theology is the only God who ever spoke creation into existence.
well, that
That
there's
every other mythos, every other creation story had destruction and battle and this prolonged fight where one would be split and then or multiple gods would be destroyed and they would be turned into all these other things.
right.
Meanwhile, unique identifier of the Hebrew God is immediately that none of that is necessary. It's simply nothing, and then he speaks it into existence.
And
And
then
that is totally
and that's
unique.
it. And then every facet of God that is defined is solely in as God's relationship to humans. There's no,
Yes.
yeah, there's like any part of it, whether it's, yeah, it's liberation from bondage, whether it's liberation, the giving of the law, it's always, and it's almost never to God's benefit. There's no clear, there's obedience to God, there's all this, but it's never what's God, we never will know what God's motivations are.
Yeah.
Um, well,
Well, his only demand is ever
yeah,
obedience,
yeah. And even
whereas
the,
other gods are demanding sacrifices and,
and
you know,
even the obedience is rooted in fear of the Lord, and because which is the reason, the best the rabbis could do to describe what religion is. They had no word for religion. Fear of God was religion, but
mm,
then fear of God was both the motivator and the end of it. You expressed your fear for God, and then in being obedient, you had a more cohesive and generally better society anyway. So it was like still like obedience to God is about living a better human existence. It's just um
yeah,
and that's why like I think all of it really points to like as theologians, like we have a responsibility to enjoin our flocks, or I'm not going to have a flock. I don't want to be a pulpit rabbi, but um, I don't. I enjoin people to not put God in a box. Um, I think that's the absolute worst thing they could do. God does not justify your contemporary issues. God's not Santa Claus. God is beyond mortal understanding, and it's your
hmm
business to find that way to God. Whether it's through the grace of the sacrifice of Jesus, or it's through the you know prayerful prayerful approach of rabbinic Judaism, and living in adhering to the law. That at the end of the day, it's all about how that relationship and letting
Right.
it be defined by God and not by us. It's
Yeah. Yeah. And that actually is the same. Like, yeah, 100% the same. I am, by the way, I did look up Abraham's other offspring because that was really bugging me. And I
yeah.
should have absolutely remembered that Midian was absolutely one of Abraham's later children. He had six other sons. Uh,
Many sons had Father Abraham.
he had many sons. Yeah, exactly. Now he had after Isaac had six other sons after Sarah died by Keturah, and all were provided for and sent east. And when you look at their names, it's clearly basically patriarchs of many other uh, Arab and Arabian and Midianite peoples. Like, just all comes back to Abraham, man.
Yeah, and
So,
there was a project a few years ago. I don't know what came of it. The guy that was trying to, you know, use our Abrahamic connections to form dialogue and groups. I at some point downstream from this, I guess we'll have to talk. We'll have to bring the Muslims into it in discussion. Not a whole lot to talk about there because neither of us obviously are. I mean, I had a lot of Muslim friends, but October 7th and what has come after has made really put a big strain on some really good friendships over the years, and
hmm
it's it's hard. I like everything else waxes and wanes. I think that there'll be rapprochement after there's peace in Gaza. May it come speedily in our days, but it's I don't know. It'd be lovely to be able to talk to our Muslim friends the way we used to be able to.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover tonight, or
No, the next one, we start to get into uh, biblical, not biblical interpretation, the medieval relations.
all right. Yeah,
We,
this is
we,
when it gets really sticky.
yeah, we'll get medieval on this
Oh,
business. Yeah.
if you didn't say it, I was gonna. So yeah.
And we had a lot of in spite of like polemic on both sides, ugly polemic on both sides, we also had a lot of positive interactions during those time periods. So it's not all bad. It's not all
No.
Inquisition all the time. um
Right, right. But hey, just
just
you can only expect that. Never. Nobody ever expects that.
Nobody expects it. No.
That's right.
I Well, I appreciate you slogging through this yet again. And
Yeah,
maybe
man.
next same bat time, same bat channel next week, maybe.
Yeah, we could do that.
Sounds good. What?
I know I'm gonna have some free time Monday probably.
Oh yeah.
Because yeah,
Okay.
because we're gonna be getting Mecca Snowzilla here this weekend. So
Yeah.
I
If you don't hear from me, send help.
well, you guys aren't. I don't believe you guys are supposed to get any.
I think we're supposed to get some. It's the cold temp. We're supposed to get that like really extreme
Yeah.
temperature.
Oh, dude, we're
But
getting that's shocking. The temperatures that we're gonna have are shockingly low.
but like if I lived in Pennsylvania, I'd be shocked. Living here in Maine, it's like
Oh,
everybody's
that's
talking
Tuesday.
about the looming
Yeah.
cold, and I'm like, stop being so dramatic. It gets cold here. It's a known thing. It gets cold in Maine. We're
Yeah.
just buck up, little trooper. Burn some extra wood. Rub your hands together.
Yeah, there you go.
Get some
Oh man.
Get some good whiskey on hand. You'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah. I got a few things sitting around here. So
All right, man. Well, don't preach like my brother. And
yeah, don't preach like my brother.
all right, talk to you soon, man.
All right, see you.